Well, good morning. My name is Steve Gamble. I'm the Chief of Police in Genoa Township. I'm joined by Deputy Chief Joe Ponzi of the Genoa Township Fire Department. I want to start by saying our community suffered a terrible tragedy yesterday with the deaths of a family of four. I know everyone in our township grieves with the family and friends, and we send our thoughts and prayers to them. I also want to be sensitive to what they are going through with any information we release. I know you have a lot of questions about what happened, and so do we. I will be able to answer some of those questions, and as I'm sure you understand, there are many I can't answer because we simply don't have the answers yet, or because in any investigation we don't release specific details until the conclusion. I want to make sure any information I put out is as accurate as possible, and that can take some time. To recap, yesterday, May 2nd, at about 1:19 p.m., our officers were dispatched to a residence at 6931 Lewis Center Road on a 911 call from a family member. The information in the 911 call indicated that they had been unable to contact the family in the house for several days, and members of the family had been complaining of illness. When our officers arrived, they met with the caller and verified the information. They also observed several cars in the driveway, and upon looking around the house, they found everything secure, but through a rear window, they observed an unresponsive person in the house. They immediately forced entry, but upon entering, they encountered a suspicious odor and exited the house. At that point, the Genoa Township Fire Department entered the house in protective gear and discovered a man, woman, and 2 children deceased, along with 3 dogs that were also deceased. They detected extremely high levels of carbon monoxide in the house, and I will let Deputy Chief Ponzi speak to that shortly in more detail. We are now conducting a death investigation to determine what happened. We are awaiting a coroner's ruling on the exact cause of death and conducting interviews and examining the evidence. As part of that, we are looking at any appliances in the house that could be a source of carbon monoxide or anything else that could be potentially a source of carbon monoxide. We are being assisted in this investigation by the Genoa Township Fire Department and the Delaware County Sheriff's Office. We will continue to do a thorough investigation and update you when we have more information to release. I'm going to bring Deputy Chief Ponzi up now, and then when he's done, we'll open up for some questions.
Good morning. Deputy Chief Joe Ponzi, Genoa Township Fire Department. So to clarify a little bit of what Chief Gamble spoke to earlier, once our personnel arrived on the scene, they suspected some sort of a carbon monoxide incident by information they were receiving while they were responding. Our personnel, dressed in their self-contained breathing apparatus to protect themselves, and with a multi-gas meter, entered the structure. And as they entered the front door of the structure, they immediately encountered 40 parts per million carbon monoxide in the air. And once upon entering the structure, the multi-gas meter went to 1,000 parts per million on the meter. That is the maximum reading that that meter has on it. So that was the highest reading we got upon initial entry into the home. To reiterate what Chief Gamble said, as they made their way through the residence, they confirmed that we had 2 adults and 2 children that were deceased. Our personnel then exited the structure, re-entered the structure with another 4-gas meter, where that meter then did alarm us that we had readings that were in excess of 1,200 parts per million of carbon monoxide. At that time, we began to ventilate the structure, and we were working in conjunction with the police department, but obviously it was unsafe for any personnel to enter that structure without protective equipment on. We continued to work to clear the carbon monoxide from the residents, and finally got the carbon monoxide levels low enough that would allow the entrance of police personnel to begin their investigation. That's about all I really have at this time. We did not, thank you, we did not find any carbon monoxide detectors within the residence.
What's the safe level of carbon monoxide?
And we typically, our policies and pretty nationally accepted standards are anything above 30 parts per million. We would recommend that you not re-enter your home if we were to be called to your residence to check for carbon monoxide. And our policies state that anything above 30 parts per million, our personnel must be in protective equipment to protect themselves while being in that environment.
So at this time, I'll open it up for any questions you may have.
Chief, can you tell us when the last time anyone reported seeing this family?
Well, again, as part of our investigation, we're building that timeline right now to make those determinations, so I can't really discuss that until we really confirm those timelines.
What information did you receive from the family? How did this develop? What led them to contact police?
Well, I think if you listen to the 911 call, it explains it, that they had not been able to contact the family members. I think they said in the 911 call since Monday, and that some of the members of the family had complained about illness, so they came to the residence, and once they checked the residence and couldn't get any response, they called us.
Had they complained about an illness? Had they complained about an illness a day before or 2 days?
You know, we just don't know at this point. Again, what I know is the information, the initial information from the 911 call. We're doing those interviews with people to try to make those determinations. I think there was a question over here.
Yeah, do we know the age of the home?
I do not know the age of the home. I think that information would be on the Delaware County Auditor's website. Again, we're going to find out the information on that.
I know you said you don't have a cause, but we've heard talk that there were renovations going on inside. Could that have somehow contributed to this?
Yeah, I appreciate the question. It's a great question, and that's exactly the type of things we're going to try to determine in our investigation. Yes, in the back.
You mentioned that there was a smell. So carbon monoxide has a smell?
Carbon monoxide, to my understanding, does not have a smell, and I don't want to go any further into, they described it to me as a suspicious odor, so they backed out based on their experience.
What was it? Can you elaborate on that at all? Was it
I'm
some
not.
kind of gas or?
No, I'm just going to keep it at that for right now, that they smelled something that they felt was suspicious, so they exited the house and called in the fire department.
Where in the home were the family members?
I'm not going to discuss that.
Are there any indications of an awareness that they might have had or attempts to escape or get help?
Again, that's part of the investigation. We're at the preliminary investigation stage. We're at point A. We need to go a lot farther before we can answer any questions like that.
Any indications that this was anything other than an accident?
Well, again, anytime you do a death investigation, you collect all the information, examine all the evidence before you come to any conclusions. So again, I'm not prepared to make any conclusions. I've been a cop for 40 years. I'm suspicious of everything and everyone whenever I do an investigation until the information and the facts and the evidence lead me to a proper conclusion. Yes?
Any indication early on as to what the source might have been, whether it might have been a furnace or a water heater?
Again, we're in the process of inspecting anything in the house, the appliances or anything that could cause carbon monoxide, so we're just not sure at this point.
There was nothing obvious.
Again, anything that we see, we want to check, to double check to make sure before we talk about what we find. Yes?
You mentioned the meter that you had was a multi-gas meter. Was there any other gases that showed up?
The only thing that our meters detected yesterday was the extremely high levels of carbon monoxide in the residence. We got no levels of any explosive gases or of anything else.
There were no carbon monoxide detectors. Was there any evidence that there ever had been? In other words, had they been removed at one time? Or?
We only looked for the presence of carbon monoxide detectors and didn't see any. It would be difficult to determine whether any had actually been removed. A lot of times those are plug-in units.
Could both of you speak to the impact this has had on first responders? Obviously a great tragedy, entire family
Sure.
discovered.
Yeah, again, and even though many of us have encountered a lot of different circumstances in our careers, anything like this does have an impact. We all have families, we all have children. So we are making sure that we have the appropriate mechanisms in place to do a critical incident stress debriefing with our personnel. I know the fire department's already started on that. We're working on the stages with our colleagues to plan that for our personnel. We did have chaplains at the scene for the family. So yeah, we are working on that. Yes, sir.
You mentioned they said something about complaining of illness earlier, the last time they spoke with family. Isn't a symptom of carbon monoxide poisoning a flu-like symptoms, or I believe, I mean, am I correct in that?
That would be accurate. So carbon monoxide poisoning symptoms actually mimic the symptoms of the flu. Headaches, nausea, vomiting, blurred vision as the exposure continues. So yes, they do mimic one another, and that's why we stress the importance of having carbon monoxide detectors in your home, because as we said, that is a odorless, colorless, tasteless gas. You will not know it is present in your home without the aid of a carbon monoxide detector.
And generally, for carbon monoxide poisoning, we think of it as in the cold weather, a faulty furnace, fireplace, or alternate heat. What are some of the other things that is possible to cause that, just to let the public know?
So generally, when we look at carbon monoxide, and you're right, because a lot of times those poisonings happen in the winter. Centers for Disease Control says that most carbon monoxide detector poison or carbon monoxide poisons happen in December, January, and February. Those are the highest heating season of the year. Typically, we have our homes shut down to stay warm, but they do happen throughout the year. A lot of times, they're also associated with when we have storm activity in the area. People will run generators, and they don't know to not run generators in their home or garage. We've had that incident happen in Genoa Township before, where we've had people running a generator in their garage and become overcome by the carbon monoxide. So typically, we look at appliances. Anything that is natural gas fed or propane fed that uses a flame to perform its work is where we're going to look for sources of carbon monoxide.
Chief Gamble. Chief,
Yes.
Can you tell us, I know you said you won't tell us where the bodies were found, but from what you saw, did the bodies give indication that I mean, it was a surprise to them? I mean, was there anything that looked suspicious with how the bodies were found?
Yeah, I'm just not going to discuss anything with the condition of the bodies that we found.
And any indication of how long they had been deceased in the home?
You know, again, that's not something we're trained to make a determination on. That's why we wait for the coroner to conduct their process. When we get those findings, that'll tell us more.
What do we know about this family? Jobs, school?
You know, all I know from what I've seen so far is that they were a great family. They were important members of our community. They had a lot of friends and family within the community. We know that the kids went to some of the Olentangy schools, and we've been in contact with Olentangy schools. We know that Olentangy schools are taking the necessary steps to make sure that they have any kind of grief counselors available there.
And this is a husband, wife, and their 2 children, correct?
Yes.
Chief, can you say
Yes.
whether the children attended school on Wednesday?
Yeah, again, that goes back to we're trying to, in our timeline, build that up and make sure we verify everybody's whereabouts, everybody's where they've been and where they've traveled to, when they were last seen. So that's all part of the investigation that they're actively working on right now. Yes, in the back.
With carbon monoxide, what is the danger? Like, how quickly, you said 30 was the threshold. So if I'm at 30, am I just going to get some flu-like symptoms? Like, how quickly does this really affect? Could it kill somebody?
It's not a simple question, but I'll attempt to give you some facts. So again, we use 30 as a threshold number within the fire department, and that's a pretty well accepted standard. If we go to your house and there's 30 parts per million or greater of carbon monoxide, we recommend that you not re-enter the house until we're able to figure out the source of the carbon monoxide. So as the numbers increase, the amount of time that you can be exposed to carbon monoxide becomes less. So basically, you could have 50 parts per million inside of your house, and these numbers are from the CDC and OSHA. No adverse effects with 8 hours of exposure. We'll get up to 200 parts per million. You're going to have a mild headache after 2 to 3 hours of exposure. 400 parts per million, headache and nausea after 1 to 2 hours of exposure. 800 parts per million, headache, nausea, and dizziness after 45 minutes. So there's where one of your great jumps is, from the 400 to the 800 parts. So basically you're looking at, it's a time-weighted average of what parts per million you're being exposed to for what period of time. As the part per million increases, your time exposure decreases dramatically. Once we get up to 1,000 parts per million, it's loss of consciousness after 1 hour of exposure. Does that answer some of your questions as far as exposures?
And in a confined space, Deputy Chief, the number would just, I mean, notwithstanding the increase in sources or whatever, the number would just continue to build?
As long as the source that was generating the carbon monoxide continued to generate the carbon monoxide. Does that answer your question?
Right, the numbers would keep going up.
That's correct, because you're in a confined space and there's no way to dissipate the carbon monoxide. It took us well over an hour to an hour and a half yesterday with ventilation fans to remove the carbon monoxide from the home to make it safe for police investigators to enter the residence.
What does that tell you?
I've been with the fire department for 25 years. I've never encountered a residence that had greater than 1,000 parts per million carbon monoxide in it. The highest I've ever seen was somewhere around 500 to 600, and that was in a very small garage. So it tells me that the numbers were high, and it takes a long time to remove that carbon monoxide from the residence.
Does it take a long time for that amount to build up, or does that indicate a large source or anything like that?
I would not want to speculate on how long or how quickly that event happened. It's a larger home, and we've got to move a lot of air through that home to ventilate it to remove the carbon monoxide, which takes time.
What is the process moving forward? What are the questions you're trying to answer, and when do you expect to have confirmation on some of those?
Well, again, we're trying to answer all the questions you answered. You know, the initial step is we're conducting interviews. We're awaiting the coroner's ruling to give us a better sense of exactly what happened there. To the extent we need to consult any outside experts on appliances or carbon monoxide, those things, along with the fire department, will do the same. Again, we have the Delaware County Sheriff's Office offering all of their resources. They're actively assisting us. So as soon as we know more and we know it's accurate information, we'll try to get it out as soon as possible. Again, I go back to, I have as many questions as you do. I just don't have all the answers right now. All right? One last question? Okay, good.
What do you recommend to folks? I assume there's going to possibly be a run on carbon monoxide detectors. I mean, do they go in hand, in your opinion, with smoke detectors? What should people do if they go off?
Smoke detectors and carbon monoxide detectors absolutely go hand in hand. And we've been preaching that message for years nationally as an organization. And we cannot stress enough how important carbon monoxide detectors are in your home. And we also stress the importance of having at least one on every level of your home. Again, I want to reiterate, this is like something that you've never seen before, and you won't know that it's there. You're never going to smell it. You're never going to taste it, okay? You won't know. And I think the evidence shows that this may be the case for this family.
And can I add, especially in Genoa Township, I know our fire department will come out to your house to check your smoke detectors and carbon monoxide detectors. If you have any questions about whether they're installed properly or you're just not sure, they will respond to assist in any way they can. So with that, I'm going to close questions. Thank you very much for coming out.